Hi, my name is Franco Tenelli, and today I'm going to share with you some of my thoughts on musicality, rubato, and how to read the score. So-called musicality doesn't have the same definition within different cultures. Some cultures consider musicality as a natural ability given by God. Others consider it as an impersonal matter achievable by careful reading of the score. You don't have to discover anything, since everything is in the score. So getting urtext editions is the ultimate goal. For those who are absolutely sure that they can read the score and therefore composer's intentions, I strongly recommend to get the video of famous educator and pianist Malcolm Bilson and his lecture in Cornell University. The title is Knowing the Score Education. And if you consider yourself a very educated musician with a degree from a famous university, you might learn that you really learned very little from that education. And Mr. Bilson often repeats in that video, they don't teach you that in universities. And then, what they are teaching us in universities is that mechanical approach really teaches us how to express composers' intentions. How can we know composers' intentions, especially if they are dead? There's a strong opinion, when music is composed, it doesn't belong to composer anymore, it belongs to a performer. And that opinion is shared not just among performers, but among some composers too. Great Austrian composer Richard Strauss was among them. I will give you a quote from Lotte Lemon's book, 5 Operas and Richard Strauss, page 18. As a conductor, Strauss was the most magnanimous person with whom I ever worked. He never showed agitation over mistakes made by individual performer, but always concentrated on the total effect. A famous colleague of mine, who like myself tended towards a certain laxness in the fine points of musical precision, was singing at the rehearsal conducted by Franz Schalk. It happened to be a Strauss opera, and the composer himself, standing next to the conductor, was outraged at the obvious liberties taken by the singer, whom otherwise he greatly respected. It seemed to him that the part was being completely distorted. Seething with anger, he strode to the back of the theater, voicing his protest. Then, from the back he went on listening, and gradually his fury gave way to a smile. He walked up to the front again, and in a whisper informed the conductor that all was well, no harm done. She sings so divinely that it really doesn't matter. We know that not all great composers shared this attitude. Some demanded almost a military discipline from the performers. One of my favorite composers, Giuseppe Verdi, especially in his late years, fired singers who didn't follow the score to the letter. Maestro Verdi was writing to Ricordi, his editor, that he is doubtful of producing Otello because Tamagno is incapable of following the score. From the psychological point of view, this has to do something with the complex of inferiority that almost all composers suffered in the 19th century. 18th and 19th century singers had a full power in opera, power over conductors and power over composers. Singers of the times would not just sing encores, but they could pull up an aria from a different composer if they were successful in this particular opera. As we know, power corrupts, and singers became more and more self-indulgent in their interpretations. Opera at the time simply became a concert stage for self-indulgent bel canto singers. Virtuosity became a self-goal, and drama in opera was completely abandoned. Those famous artists, spoiled by power and wealth, did what they liked. Those singers often just sang high notes to the joy of the circus public. This sentiment is very well expressed in Richard Wagner's critical review, Virtuoso and Artist. Rubini, that played Don Ottavio and Don Giovanni, writes Richard Wagner, just cared about his B-flat, neglecting all the rest of his register, not mentioning his poor stage presence. Then we ask a question, why those performers of bel canto era gained such a power? Let's look at the history of the early bel canto. Those bel canto singers at that time were not just singers, but full-fledged educated musicians and composers. In those days, even improvisations were allowed. Singers' profession became very popular and very profitable. Time was running faster and singers were educated in a short period of time. No knowledge of counterpoint, of composition was required. Singers multiplied in quantities, but not in qualities. Singers were manufactured, but not educated. Teaching how to sing high notes in short period of time became more profitable than proper vocal education. Great Russian composer Mikhail Glinka was also a notable singer and a teacher. He complained that at his own time, singers were taught by instrumentalists who don't have any idea how to teach voice. In my own method, I quote Glinka, "One has to master his natural tones. But what do they do instead in our modern schools? By stretching the voices, they bring fast but not beautiful results." Sounds like 21st century, isn't it? So we see the decline not only in musical abilities but in vocal abilities at the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century. The attitude of the composer or their writing style has changed too. The composers lost their trust in singers' ability to interpret right. There were some exceptional singers who were allowed to interpret, like Enrico Caruso, and there were some exceptional singers who abused their power. In opera, great Russian bass Fyodor Sholapin, when he didn't like the tempo of the conductor, he would look angrily at him and would start conduct himself. There was a case during the Rimsky-Korsakov, Mozart and Salieri opera when conductor was so outraged by Sholapin's behavior, putting his baton and noting, "Please, don't forget, I'm a conductor here." The answer came right away. In a garden, when there are no singing birds, the frog is a nightingale. Arturo Toscanini, great Italian conductor, who was a cellist in orchestra before, brought new era in opera traditions. Arturo Toscanini was a very controversial person. At the beginning, he supported extreme nationalism in Italy. He even participated in a Nazi election, but after losing it, he became an ardent fighter against Mussolini regime and a champion of democracy. But there was nothing democratical in his approach to opera. He became a symbol of a come scritto maestro who would never allow self-indulgent singing. Geraldine Ferrar, once outraged of his dictatorship approach to singers, said, "Maestro, you cannot treat us like this. We are all stars here." Like Sholapin's, Maestro's response was very fast. When sun shines, meaning himself, of course, stars are not seen in the sky. So you see that the freedom or interpretation skills of the performers highly depend on the traditions, and traditions highly depend on political situations within the art of opera. And speaking of double standards, Toscanini himself opposed so-called self-indulgent singing, was himself quite a self-indulgent person, not only comparing him to the sun as opposed to the stars. Read B.H. Huggins' Conversations with Toscanini. When Toscanini issued a letter of resignation in 1979, resignation from NBC Orchestra, the letter of resignation that NBC issued in facsimile had Toscanini addressing David Sarnoff as "My very dear David," and beginning with the statement that 17 years ago you sent me an invitation to become the musical director of an orchestra to be created especially for me. And Toscanini knew very well that orchestra was not created especially for him. Some were so shocked by his egocentric letter that didn't even believe that Toscanini wrote it. Toscanini was a perfectionist and demanded everybody around him who worked with him to be perfectionists too. He never allowed anybody to sing or even play from the score. It's my way or no way. Toscanini once went really too far when he saw the pianist, accompanist for his opera rehearsals, brought score with him. He threw the score at the guy, injuring him. But you can ask me why I'm talking about those things who have nothing to do or seemingly nothing to do with the freedom of interpretation. We have to understand that the freedom of interpreter depends on the traditions. And who does influence those traditions? The answer is quite simple: those personalities who have actual power in music today. Now, let's go back to interpretation. One of the most important tools in interpretation is choosing the right tempo. But where can I get the right tempo? It seems quite simple. Just buy yourself a metronome and follow the score's recommendations. But if that was so simple, why Toscanini's tempis are different from Furtwängler's or Herbert von Karajan's? I once attended conductor classes and I asked the same questions. What is the correct tempo? The answer was quite surprising coming from a conductor. Correct tempo can never be established once and for all metronomically. It will depend on interpreter's temperament and even on acoustics of the whole. The most important thing for the tempo is to be expressive. And truly expressive one can be only when he finds his own way. What is tempo rubato then? Trust me, nobody can give you a comprehensive answer on that one. Some describe it as an ultimate freedom for a classical performer, but that definition is way too general. Some describe it as if the left hand would play very rhythmically, almost metronomically, and the right hand takes some rhythmical freedoms. Others describe it as ability to take rallentandos and accelerandos at will beautifully. So rubato is rather an aesthetic music category that cannot be written down in a score, and it will depend on interpreter's personality. Another question: how long should I play or sing this particular fermata in the score? The length of the fermata will depend on a particular instrument. The same performer can take a different approach to fermata depending on the instrument he's playing and acoustics of the whole he's playing. Or, for example, how should dotted note be played? Oh, you might think that is a simple one. I advise you to purchase or to borrow Malcolm Bilson's Knowing the Score education video. After all these years of education, getting degrees, you will be surprised how little you know about how to read the score correctly. And I want to mention those people who treat the scores religiously, but they often get into the trap. I will give you an example from my personal experience. I was preparing one of the Verdian roles and my pianist had a ricordi score. She was a very good pianist and very good coach, that's why I hired her. But I knew the opera from numerous recordings that I've listened before, so I noticed the mistake and I let her know. She looked at me as if I almost offended her personally. She very eloquently tried to convince me that I was wrong, the score can never be wrong. Look at the lyrics, even lyrics suggest that Verdi wanted to do it this way. But I trust my ear. I gave her an example. I just recently listened to the recording of Maestro Riccardo Muti and Placido Domingo doing the same role. That did not convince her. Domingo and Muti can make a mistake. And even when I said, but it was a studio recording. So, as you see, she was very stubborn, accepting that the score can be wrong. I had only one chance proving her that I'm right, with another score. So I went up a library and picked up a full orchestral score. And so she eventually admitted there was a mistake in a piano score. You see, even reputable editions sometimes make mistakes, like recording. For example, the edition of Madame Butterfly recording has some erroneous chords. For that, of course, is a solution. If you buy an urtext edition, then those kind of problems will not exist. But Malcolm Bilson says that don't be naive if you get an urtext edition, that you know how to interpret it. But even come scritto approach with urtext editions may take you far away from the composer's intentions, because seemingly looking the same notes in the scores can be and should be played differently according to the style and time it was written, especially in vocal music that is full of traditions. That was Franco Tenelli. Until next time.